And we are live. Welcome everybody to the live stream here. We're going to be talking with Matt Rhys about Ideal Comics and the first issue, Vox Populi, which will be on Indiegogo. This is the Matt Rhys show today. We're just missing one Matt Rhys, and there he is.
Sorry, I'm running late.
Hey, running late is better than not running at all.
That is true. That is very true.
That's okay. That's cool. We're gonna get this thing linked out here. I'm gonna go to my phone because YouTube is one of these crazy things where you have to have two versions of it running to do a live stream. So I can share this out to Twitter, let people know we're live. Get a little small talk out of the way here, and then get on to the business at hand of trying to get $1,700 raised here in the next 5 days.
Well, we picked flexible funding, and if we make it to 500, we'll be able to fulfill.
So, hey, that's not bad. You can get 200 in 5 days.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. So,
well, that's really cool. I was just going over your Twitter thing here to look for you to see when you've been on last, and saw that Alex Ross piece of TV hero art that you had tweeted out there. And every time I see Alex Ross stuff, I have to stop and just appreciate it. But it brought to mind something that I read the other day here. Do you watch any of the CW hero shows?
No, I don't.
Oh man, you're missing out on a lot of stuff to gripe about.
Have we talked before?
Well, it's a mixed bag for me. Because I really, really like watching The Flash. And I really, really like watching Supergirl, both for different reasons. The Flash I like for watching and saying, wow, they got a really good episode in here. And Supergirl for saying, oh my God, that last episode was actually a good episode. Because, oh man, yeah, exactly. Because Supergirl has become the joke of, moralistic culture and diversity hiring and everything that people make a joke about of liberal tropes is a plot point in Supergirl, and an important, serious one. So, but when they brought Lex Luthor in, it was like a breath of fresh air. I'm like, oh my God, they should have brought some psychotic world beater in a long time ago, because suddenly they got story focused and it showed. So naturally, they must have taken care of him and got him out of the way, because we couldn't have that. But to the point that I was getting to, and I do have a point, and I wear a hat to cover it. The television heroes that I saw in that showed Batman and Robin and Burt Ward, looking spiffy in his young Robin days. And I was reminded that Burt Ward had been tapped for a role in the annual crossover this year, being Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I was curious if you watch that kind of stuff and if you had any theories on what he might be doing. You think they're going to bring in Batman 66 world and have an old Robin?
Well, I would hope so. That would really be something fun. Pull it off or not, but
I don't think they could outright say that it was the Batman 66 world without having to pull in a lot of rights. But maybe having him as You remember what the Earth 2 Robin costume looked like when Robin became an adult?
Yeah, with the bat symbol on it and the R in place in the middle of it.
Yeah, that would be a nice little kitschy kind of thing to pull off as an alternate Earth Robin.
Now, I'm not a big fan of the whole multiple Earths thing, but if you're going to do it anyway, I can't imagine not going full out and putting a little bit of the cheese in there.
Absolutely. Because not every world deserved to be saved, to be honest with you. But I don't know. I was one of those guys. Gosh, Crisis for me happened when I was senior in high school, just getting ready to go into college. I was like, okay, this is a really cool story. But even then, I could see that there was going to be problems with this because, I was like, okay, you're already starting to write to people who are too stupid to understand multiple Earths, and people get it. The smarter people understood, vibrational planes, alternate timelines. I think you're making a mistake here because now you're going to age the Justice Society so much that you'll never be able to use them unless you're telling flashback stories. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And what are they doing with the Flash and DC Comics now? Well, they're back to multiple Earths because they needed them. Good little trademark devices to keep things alive. So what things do you read, Matt?
Right now I'm really liking Hawkman. Venditti has been rocking it out pretty good. I'm actually a post-crisis DC guy. I think that in a lot of ways, James Robinson's Starman is the pinnacle of modern comics.
Absolutely.
And its genius falls in two places. One, that it committed to its bit with the beginning, middle, and end, and two was that it has a fixed timeline. It was 95 to 2000, and that was it. And so because of that, the rest of the DC that intersects with it was forced to address those sorts of things. And I think that allowed Robinson to tell a meaningful long-form story that was as history informed as any great literary work can be. And I personally think that's one of the things that a lot of comics miss out on, is this rotating timeline. You end up having to ignore things that have been done before. I think you actually miss out on a lot of stuff that way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about comics is it was always, there was that suspension of disbelief, not with the whole superpowers thing and men in masks, but with the fact that you had to believe rather that Batman's been in action for 5 years, and he's always been in action for the last 5 years. And it doesn't matter that you've read 20 years worth of stories or 50 years worth of stories. He's been in action for the last 5 years. And as soon as, for me, again, I'm 52, so God, I've got years and years of this under my belt now. But the pivot point for me was New Teen Titans, when Dick Grayson became Nightwing.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as that happened, and as soon as we got another Robin, we knew that Dick Grayson had been Robin from 14, just to pick a point. Maybe it was even 12. Right. Suddenly we've got Jason Todd coming in as a young teenager who's now a man, followed by Tim Drake, who was a young teenager and is now a young man, followed by Damian, who is, at least 14 years old, maybe 12.
I think 13. I think that was a plot point. Was his 13th birthday.
All right.
Second storyline in Teen Titans he was in.
So if he's 13, then we have to say that Batman has at least been Batman for the last 13 years, because, why the hell would Talia al Ghul be looking at Bruce Wayne before he did anything as the detective? And I actually have that book that Grant Morrison decided to flat out ignore, Batman, Son of the Demon, where you ended up with seeing Batman and Talia in a non-rape scene, and it's a perfectly consensual love story. And she tells him she lost the baby, and you end up seeing that baby in a basket at the very end of the story in the final panel. And you just knew that there was a bat baby running around somewhere, and continuity was just going to ignore it forever. And now, lo and behold, here he is, but we couldn't have it be the way it was. Grant Morrison just knew that, I know there's a bat baby running around somewhere. I'm going to bring him out now, and this is how it happened.
Well, and the thing that's frustrating to me about that is I'm not a huge Damian fan. I think he's got his uses and everything, but I don't think the continuity necessitated a live birth for that. And according to the 0 Hour, that story was scrubbed out after 0 Hour, so there was no need to bring it out, except that Morrison wanted to.
Sure.
Introduce that idea. So,
well, in Morrison's whole run, his idea was that all the Batman stories happened, every single one of them.
Yeah.
Which, I'm also fine with, but they happened in the last 5 years. So there's that to deal with as well.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous idea.
It was a very trippy idea, because, now you're dealing with the Batman stories where Riddler's running across the top of rooftops over giant billboards that are actual functioning cash registers, um, and tea kettles that are pouring out hot water over the top of streets. That kind of whole surrealistic pop culture thing that they did in the 60s. Anyhow, that's the old comics. Let's talk about what we're trying to do new here. Now you're getting into the rocky waters of IGG.
Oh my goodness.
And it's been sink or swim for some people. Obviously, we've got some people who've dove in and just found Spanish galleons right underneath their diving spot and brought them up. And we've had people dive in and we've never seen them again. So,
well, this is the second attempt with this book, and so that's where we're at with that one. But this story is, of course, it's set in. I was talking about one of Starman's greatest conceits was that it was a fixed 5-year timeline for the sake of that story.
Right.
One of the things that when my buddy Chris and I back in 2005 were deciding to build a universe, that was one of the things we wanted to go ahead and incorporate, was this idea of a fixed timeline. And so all of our stories, whether they are our webcomic Force of Good and Evil, or print projects, or the mini stories we've done here and there, they all have a place in this fixed timeline, an alternate history stuff. And this particular story, Tales of Shadow, Vox Populi, is about the outlaw urban detective, the expositioner, and he is going on as he begins a series of investigations into these missing persons, and he ends up discovering a conspiracy using monsters to wreak havoc within a city.
Now, let's talk about that name for a second here. The idea of a comic book hero called the Expositioner is something that really, I don't know, I find that very funny, because it's almost like recap Squirrel in the Tale of Lenore, where he just kind of pops out and tells you everything that happened in the last issue and then pops back away again. That's his whole job. The Expositioner sounds something like he's going to talk to you in all the text boxes and tell you the story that's happening. So what does it mean when you create it?
Well, when we created it, it was originally the Expositioner was originally created by my cohort Chris Lawton, and in a script he was working on that would tell the story of X's shaming and his outlawing, right? And he was originally just a placeholder name. He wanted a character that would be the expositor in the story, and the idea is that he's kind of inspired by that detective story tradition of the parlor room scene, where the investigator, hoists the criminal on their own petard by explaining what they did and how they did it and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, the old Hercule Poirot thing from Agatha Christie.
And those that had a place in Dashiell Hammett's stuff and that whole genre of things. And so we wanted to go ahead and have Chris really wanted to harken back to that feeling for it, but he couldn't pick a name out. So in his placeholder in the script, he just put the Expositioner. And I'm reading over his script, because what we would do is we'd sit down once a week and we'd each bring what we'd written that week, and we'd critique the hell out of it. And I said, the Expositioner, and Chris says to me, he says, yeah, it's a placeholder. I don't know. I said, I think it's perfect. I think you gotta stick with it, because it tells exactly what you want to get out of the story, and it even has that Rocketeer kind of superhero-y feel about it. And I think that's a thing for it. So within the context of, so that's the meta context of it, right? Within the context of the story, he sees his vision, his mission, so to speak, as helping people find the end to their stories. As an investigator, it's about solving crimes for victims' sake, and allowing people to have closure, whether it's finding the guy who murdered your brother, whether it's tracking down your missing stuff, however that works out. Okay.
Now this is a one and done kind of story. I know it's issue number 1, but is it going to be a cliffhanger ending continuation? Is it 22 pages, 48 pages?
we're looking at 28 pages for the first issue, so a miniseries, 2-issue miniseries. So the first we're planning on once we get that $500 mark, we'll have issue 1 finished in December, and then we'll start work on issue 2 and hopefully crowdfund that in first or second quarter next year and have that done. We'd actually like to get it done a little sooner, time schedule wise, but we'll see how that works out with stuff. So
okay, now let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of actually doing an Indiegogo comic, because I think a lot of people have the dream of saying, hey, let's make a comic, kids, and going on to Indiegogo and throwing some artwork up there and trying to raise some money. But eventually it comes to the time where you actually have to make a comic book. And that's not just something you can do with an Epson printer and a stapler at home. So how do you go about finding somebody who's actually going to take your project, do the printing, get a good cover on it, and get it all done on the budget that you raise with the Indiegogo funds?
Yeah, well, we've been making comics on web and in print since 2006, and we actually have 2 anthologies we've done already, and we've used a print house out of Michigan for those who've been really happy with those results, and that's probably what we're going to be looking at for this project as well. But they're real pros to work with. We've enjoyed them. So
cool. So you do have somebody to work with. That's good that you've got somebody that's already you have a relationship with. Amazon and Ingram Spark have this deal where people can, self-publishing has been a thing for a while now. With iUniverse led the way on that, and it was kind of a iffy kind of thing where people were just printing anything. But now you got real talent people who are going in and just saying, hey, I'm going to go this road myself here because here's print on demand that's going to do my hardcover, and it's going to be a really sharp looking deal, and I own the ISBN. There's a real publishing house behind it, not just the Amazon one or the Kindle one, KDP. I can see a market in the near future here for all the people who are doing Indiegogos. If there was a print on demand kind of comic book printer where you could, order as many as you needed, and they would print them just like they do these hardcovers or paperbacks, just print them on demand.
Well, there actually are a couple of firms that do similar things like that. Greco Printing is one we've worked with, and also Blam, and they're out of South Carolina, I think. But they'll do print on demand stuff as well, and they keep up a web store and things too.
Well, that's very cool. They need to get places like that need to get more press, I think, in the comic book world.
Well, and I think a lot of creators that run the circuit, a lot of the small indie guys kind of spread the word around amongst each other. I don't know that it gets out to people that are on the other side of that, though, because I know before we started getting into print comics, that's not something I was aware of. But through going to cons and talking to people, I've
yeah, it's sort of like an open secret among the professionals who are already doing it. But everybody's heard of print on demand for traditional books, the prose novels. I think, boy, if more people knew that they could, if people could go and print a comic book without having to fundraise. I mean, just pay the artist and get a print on demand thing, then you wouldn't maybe have some of these goals that had to be reached.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is art in itself is pretty expensive.
It is.
And that's one challenge that a lot of people run with. Part of the reason our print cost is so low is because our art team are all partners in our company, and so we're all vested in doing, like, if we can for our printing and make a couple extra bucks, then that's marketing to the next project or something like that too. So that's part of where we're looking at with that. Of course, you want to turn a profit because that makes printing the next book or the next set of books for the con an easier thing than reaching our own pockets. But where we're at is trying to expand the market just from we're in rural Nebraska, so we're in a small community that's next to the larger, like the Front Range, Colorado.
Yeah.
A pretty big indie comic scene, and we're known there. But it's we're looking and hoping to cast a wider net using the crowdfunding, because it's everyone's online,
So you said you take issues to conventions that you go to and set up tables there?
Yep, we do.
What's your success rate with stuff like that?
Well, it's very mixed. A lot of it depends on the crowd. We've had some that people are really interested in the books. We've had some that will not sell a whole lot. So it really just depends on finding that. The other part of it is, our because our passion is kind of old school comics. I think that actually, in some ways, there's not the same market to a lot of cons. We don't have, the sexy ladies on the cover. We don't have, it's not something that looks flashy and poppy. A lot of our anthologies, because they're anthologies that are meant to, feel like you're picking up an old book,
Yeah.
And so we get a couple of the guys that are just like, oh, hey, I remember picking up 80-page giants, from the 40s when I was, in junior high. Oh, okay, cool. We'll talk about it and talk about the universe, and people get kind of intrigued about that. But it's not everybody who's into that kind of a thing.
So when you talk about they look like the old school comics, are we talking like the Bronze Age, the 70s kind of stuff, or what do you use for your model?
Well, let me see if I can pull up a screenshot here of a couple of our books. Give me just a sec. I should have had this prepared ahead of time, but I don't. So.
Preparing things ahead of time is anathema to me. So
I just got off work.
We should have scheduled this for about a half hour later, man. We didn't have to rush you like that.
I was literally walking back across the street. So, okay.
I'm going to tell the live chat people that they can talk. Oh, never mind. I was going to tell them to talk amongst themselves or ask questions, but there's nobody there. We can actually share the nuclear codes right now, and nobody would know.
Well, that's a little disappointing.
Well, the thing is, it will stay out there, and we're going to promote it, and people will come. People get the replays on our stuff. Nobody pops in here to listen to us live half the time, because every time I come in here, as soon as I do, and Ethan or Umbrella Guy will throw up a live chat stream, and I'm like, well, there goes the audience.
Those big guys do get I'm not meaning to sound like sour potatoes, but they definitely pull a crowd. That's for sure.
Yeah, the super chat market is crazy. I've had some of the people tell me off screen, what they can pull in during just doing YouTubes, and I had one guy at a con tell me he has a modest size show and he pulls in $2,000 a week just on super chats.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, that sounds like a lucrative market, and all you do is sit in front of a microphone and talk and be interesting. I can do half of that. So maybe I can make just $1,000 a week. All I got to do is talk in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
For those tuning in, Matthew is looking for artwork to bring up on the screen.
Okay. Let me see here. Okay, this is, man, that's not the best photo, but it does have both covers for our anthologies on it. So let me share that. And
I'm not seeing it.
how about now? Can I get it to work now?
I just see your icon.
Oh, well, drat. Hang on, then. Let me see if I've got...
If you're in Google Hangouts, you might want to... Let's see. You got to turn that...
Do I have, okay, it says I'm sharing something.
Okay, now we're seeing it.
Okay, here's a fuzzy picture of the two covers for our two anthologies. So in each of these, they both have 7 stories apiece. They're 64 pages. And they've got stories throughout the history of our universe. We've got Westerns, we've got comedies, we've got Golden Age action stories, we've got serious mysteries, satirical mysteries, all kinds of stuff that's in there. And
Yeah.
so it's something we like to try to tell people. It's something for everyone, but I don't know if maybe my pitch work is terrible. Who knows?
Well, I used to really love reading the indie comics when I was first discovering them. And again, that'd be, gosh, 1985, 86. And I know indie comics have existed long before then. But, I was growing up where all the comic books were printed at the time. So, I saw all the DC and Marvels. And for the longest time, I thought, gosh, if you're going to read superheroes, those are the only 2 companies in town. And then I started finding, Pacific Comics and First Comics and Red Circle Comics, and it was just a blast to see all these new universes popping up. And some of them were some of them were really polished, and some of them were really primitive looking, but they were all new and it was different. And that was the appeal, the fact that it was different. Of course, now today, you've got there are so many indie comics out there, and I've just been discovering new ones every other week that are putting out quality product. So it's getting a little hard to keep up. For an industry that's supposedly floundering, there's a lot of new entries coming into the market.
Well, I think that's actually, I think those two things aren't unrelated. You look at like the wild success that they've had with like Peter Semedius had in the last couple of years, and how Alterna has just become a new word for quality, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is just because that, people are like, man, I want to read comics, but, $4 a piece is real expensive. And I'm not sure I care for the direction on here. And I'll take a gamble on $1.25. And then you find out that it's really good stuff, like Scrimshaw, one of my favorite books, coming out right now is, probably one of my all-time favorite sci-fi comics. As far as like pure sci-fi, not anything else with that, and but it is very much a quality product that isn't quite in the mainstream and has a really good value to it. And I think that can succeed in some ways, and especially as quickly as that's become a thing so recently, because the mainstream's not meeting customer expectations.
No, they're not. And I've been happy with everything I've read from Alterna. I really like Midnight Mysteries, and it's not just because we bought the back cover of #1 either, but that did help. But beyond Alterna, I mean, there's been things like the No Ones from Cave Publishing, White Widow from Absolute, and just these again high quality products, and they're still coming in the $3.99 range, but it's like there's this secret boom going on under this muffled cloud of doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assessment.
Well, we want to make sure that Ideal Comics becomes one of those things. And for your distribution now, you're still talking about, I guess, direct disbursement to the people who have funded the Indiegogo, and then direct sales through the comic market. Are you going to be distributed through Diamond in any way, or?
We are not planning on distributing through Diamond. We've talked about it, and for where we're at right now, I think we would rather try to look at other options. We've had some brief conversations with some other indie publishers that are looking at different distribution schemes, and we're looking to see if we can find some sort of partner, like geographically. Like if you guys distribute our books in California, we can make contacts out on the Front Range to try to do your books, and we'll see if that pans out. That's all just talk right now, but I'll have to see if that works out. I know that like one of the things that we're also hoping to do, direct to consumer, still, our plan right now is, next week, if we get that 500, we can definitely go to print. We have a website that we've had, idealcomics.net for probably 12, 13 years. We've had that name, and we're going to go ahead and put a website, like a pre-order for the comics, so people, we won't be able to go into demand, but we can still go ahead and do a similar thing, and we'll sell those comics. And when we go to print, we can work that out. So we'll be able to work that in to the fulfillment at the same time.
All right. Well, I will be sure to edit the video as soon as we're done here in just a few minutes, and add idealcomics.net to the description, so it goes right under the Indiegogo link we've got there, so that if anybody does miss out on the Indiegogo version, they can go straight to your shop and pull them from there. And again, this is where that whole idea of a comic book print on demand market would be great, because you wouldn't have to keep an inventory. You wouldn't have to print 500 or 1,000. And maybe it'd be a digital on demand kind of thing.
Yeah, and we definitely we actually we have some mini comics that are on Comic Central that are digital on demand, that are just like little PDF files, and so those are out there as well. And actually, if you go to our website, we've migrated servers, so we're in the process of rebuilding the Ideal Comics website. But if you click the store link at the top, it will take you to our Comic Central page.
Okay.
We've comics anywhere from a quarter to I think $1.
Okay. Well, digital was supposed to be the wave of the future for comics, but again, I'm kind of in the Stan Lee vein of things there, where I just like to hold them in my hand.
My biggest problem is I've been collecting comics for a long time, and when people found out that I like comics, every once and again, I've got a friend from back in the day, or an aunt or somebody that'll find a crate of battered beauties, what I like to call them, just reader copy comics, lifestyle or something, and they'll show up at the house and give me this crate full of comics, and I have a hard enough time reading through my real physical books that I've got a very substantial backlog of stuff, in addition to my weekly polls. So digital comics, I don't get around to reading them. It's out of sight, out of mind, even though I have,
Exactly. It's got to be laying on the coffee table there to remind you to pick it up and go through it.
Probably 4 or 5 gigs of digital comics, and I've read maybe half of them.
Yeah, one of the great pleasures I have in my collecting life, and one of the big stumbling blocks, is that I have so many comics, all in boxes downstairs, and it's been so long since I've gone through them to sort them that I've got like 3 boxes of unsorted comics and 18 boxes of sorted ones. So it's come to the time of year where I've got to replace all the beat up boxes and get them all sorted out in the basement into alphabetical stacks and then numerical stacks, and as I do that, I always get like about a third of the way through, like Action Comics. I'm like, oh, I haven't read this one in a while, and off comes the tape and out comes the book, and 25 minutes later I haven't sorted any more comics because I'm reading another old comic book.
Yeah. I have very, very similar problems. But a number of years ago, my wife made the very reasonable request that I keep my comics in one place. And so we actually have a series of filing cabinets that I keep them in. And I've got sorted cabinets and I've got unsorted cabinets. And I try to take them from one to the other as it goes along. But oftentimes when I'm putting some that I've read back into the sorted cabinets, I will find that there are ones that I don't remember reading, and so those will go back into the unsorted.
Yep. Yeah, I've been there a lot too. I'm going to be sorting them again real soon here. I've got boxes on order, and it's probably going to be one of the most boring 8-hour live streams I've ever put up, but I'm definitely going to live stream the thing just to share with people the impact of maintaining a collection. It's one of the things I don't think I've seen anybody else do out there. They draw the books, they write the books, they talk about putting books together, but what are we going to do when we got all these things here? Well, you're going to do something really boring like this. And, I'll talk to people while I'm doing it. We'll see what happens. Anyway, clapping my hands together on video, no one can see me. Matt, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I always love talking with people about old comics and what they're doing in the comics business, especially people who are trying to, stake out a claim against all the big guys doing some indie work.
Yep.
Again, everybody, for tuning in for the replay, we are talking about Vox Populi, and that is the first issue of actually Tales of Shadow. Now, is it Tales of Shadow Vox Populi, or is it Tales of Shadow and then Vox Populi is just the first issue?
Vox Populi will be the subtitle for the miniseries.
Okay, and it's how many issues is the miniseries? I'm not saying that.
It'll be 2 is what we're looking at for it. The story's got 2 main wings. In the first one, X will discover the monsters and in the framework, and in the second issue, discovers the why. That's sort of a bit of a secret there.
All right, so 2-issue miniseries.
Yeah. The 2-issue miniseries, yeah.
Excellent.
And we've got artists, Rico Cobos doing the pencil work, and Barry Tetz doing our ink and colors. So.
All right, so everybody go down to the description portion down here and be sure to follow that to the Indiegogo so you can get this done. These guys are trying to get $500 raised up at a bare minimum to get this out the door. They are at 307, so they only need $193 more. And just to see if I don't overload my little wireless connection here, I'm going to reload the page to make sure that that is the most current value. And AT&T putting me on the best network 1997 has to offer. Yes, 307. So we're looking for another $293. We have 7 days left. This is a completely doable goal to raise $200 in 7 days. So if you can, and you want to help more people get into comics and expand the range of options out there for people, definitely put your money into Vox Populi, Tales of Shadow, Vox Populi. Sorry, my Latin classes make me say Populi. All done by Matt Rhys and company out there at Ideal Comics. Matt, again, been a pleasure talking with you, and we will keep in touch to make sure this is a success as much as we can.
Thank you very much for having us on. It's been an honor.
See you later, Matt.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.